Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel at Mabuya Yosise. So in today's lesson we are going to make it a very brief but very important. So we are just going to teach about function and inputs. So in today's lesson we are going to learn about function that allows us to give an input, and after which we are going to build a cipher program which encodes a CISA cipher, which is an ancient type of communication. So wherein when Caesar wants to go into war, he used to write a code that encrypts or encodes the way of communication. For an example, if you give a code, for an example, you get from A to Z or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we have numbers assigned to this A, B, C, D, E for an example. So you see A corresponds to 1, B corresponds to 2, C corresponds to 3. But sometimes they can give a space, like after any 2 letter or after any 2 number, we start the counting. So you give a way of skipping these letters. For an example, I will show on the screen. As you can see, this A, if we say A shift to 2 places, A, B shift to 2 places, then if you encode 1, it means shift to 2 places will be the letter assigned to it. So these are the way we are going to, but in this lesson today, we are not going to go in deep into it because it takes some time. So we are just going to start with function with inputs, and we talk about arguments and parameters. Then again, we are going to look about positional arguments and keyword arguments. And the functions are what's handling way that takes a complex set of instructions and packaging them in order for us to get an output. So we are going to look into this type of information today and see what is a block of code. A block of code, of course, is like the structure of the code is referred to as the block of code. So of course, you know, we are running this code remotely. So we need to go to our replica account and we'll start writing our code. So if this is your first time of joining us, don't forget to subscribe on the channel, comment, like and share, as every week we bring content of similar structure, and again we are going to try to improve this content we are doing. So we need your support in order to help the channel to grow. So first, let's start with our own function. We're going to create our own function, which is define my function. We are going to define our own function and we'll see. After which, we are going to build something that asks the user to give an input, then we expect an output. So open your replica account. So here we go. So first, let's say we want to define our own function. So here you can say define def, you say my function, give an underscore, my function. Okay, then if we say here print hello from a function, so as you can see here, this one here you can see, let's say we want to print 3 sets of information for an example. So the first one we can just say hello from a function. So let's say this, then we can say again print how are you doing today, for an example. Print how are you doing today, how are you doing today. Okay, question mark. So then let's say again print again, then we say hope everything is fine, everything is fine. Okay, so now let's see this function. So as you can see here, this is our function. So now we want to create our own function. So you can see the colon here. When you say define my function, you give colon. So everything here you can see here, when you run our code, you can see it will print all this function because we create our function. So now if we go ahead now, we say print, let's say this function, we define a function. So let's say let our function be greet function for an example, because we are greeting here. So we can say define, we can say greet here. So instead of this, let me just copy this code. Okay, so this function we are saying define my function. Let's say we'll give it here greet function. So now we say define greet. This is a greet function. So now the greet function is this. So now if we say print, so now if we call our function, now we say greet here. First we start from define the function. That's before we said define my function, then we'll give this quotation, we'll give this bracket and this. So then now when we give this greet function, it will print 3 lines of code that says hello from a function, then how are you doing today, then hope everything is fine. So if we go ahead and run this code, we shall see all this code here printed here in the console. So let's go ahead and run this piece of code and see. So here you can see here hello from a function, how are you doing today, hope everything is fine. So here you can define your own function. For us to say this is a greet function, if we say again define my function, then when it comes to here to call your function here, this one is referred to as calling a function. This whole set of code is referred to as a block of code. From define greet function to greet here is referred to as a block of code. Okay, so now let's make this more interesting. So this one here, the first one here is just a simple function. Let's define it here. Let's say this is just a simple function. This is a simple function. This is just a simple function that returns a value. Okay, so this is just a simple function that returns a value. So when we define our function here, we say define greet function. Then at the end of the day, you can write your piece of code. Then you can just call your function, then it will give you an output. What if we try to replace? Let's first copy this. Okay, you can copy this. We'll copy this, then let's try to disable this one. Okay, so now here you can see, let's make this more interesting. You see here, define greet function here, this greet. Then later we'll call on our function, which is greet here. So let's make this one, as you can see here, this means here, if now we want to call another function that allows us to give an input, this is where we can give something to give us an output. So let's say here something. So here we can input everything here in this function, a parameter that at the end of the day, this one inside here is referred to as a parameter. But first, I just want us to make this more interesting by giving what type of parameter we want to give here. Let's say this something we want to give here is name. So first, let's say instead of you can just say hello, so let's say here hello. something here for an example. This again we say hello something, and now we can say here, then we can, yeah, let's just give something, how are you doing today? Then we say again here something. I just want to make, I hope everything is fine. Okay, let's stop here. So now for us to make, I'm just trying to give you a clue or an overview of how we treat this input function. So for an example, now we define our function, which is something. So this function allows us to give an input. So the input here will be this function we call here, which is something. Okay, so now if we want to give an input of this function, let's say here this something, we can use our f string here. We use f string here. So no sooner we use this f string, this something now becomes, we use this, I hope you know these brackets that you can say as curly braces. So this something now, before, you know, when we move this something here without these curly braces, this something was highlighted. Okay, but now they said the parameter something is unknown. So if we say now something here, and again here we use f string. We talked about f string before, so if this is your first time of watching this lesson, don't forget to check the previous videos and you can learn a lot more. So now let's see here. Now we say here define greet. So what if we want to print this now? So here we can say now greet, then we put here something. Okay, so here this one here you can see is a function that allows to give an input. Okay, so this you can say a function that's allowed to give an input here. So now let's see here this function. Mind you, this first one we printed here is just a simple function, whereas for this second one here, this second part is a function that allows for an input. So now here we say define greet. So let's say here we say something, right? So let's say this something wants to print here, let's say it's a name. Let's change this to name, greet with name for an example. So here now we can say, here again we can say name. Okay, and this again we can say here name. The something we want to print is name, so here again we say name. So now here we input the name now here. So how we input the name here, if we say print, so now if we say print, let's say name, now we can give here the name. Let's say Alhaji. Okay, here name we say Alhaji. Then here again let's use f string. Then here again we say hope you are doing fine. Use the name. So this one is a function that allows us to give an input. So now if we go ahead and run this code, let's see the difference here first before we proceed. Before I explain further, let's just run this. Okay, good. So as you can see here, this is very clear. First, you say what? Hello, Alhaji. How are you doing today, Alhaji? Hope everything is fine. Okay. So now, but what you observe here is when you give here, we just define a function here, name. So now the computer knows that Alhaji is a name. So now everything you greet here has to end with Alhaji because Alhaji is a name. So this allows us to give an input when we run this greet function we created here at the starting of the code. This one is a simple function and this one is a function that allows for an input. So now let's see. And so here the good thing I like about this type of coding is when you want to modify this type of code, for an example, you want to change the name of the user. So instead of you to come line by line to change the name or to give the input of the name, like what we did here for an example, if here I want to say hello Alhaji, how are you doing Alhaji, this. So here we can modify it just by changing here the name. So if you want to greet someone, you can just change here the name, and even this one you can just remove. If you are not interested about this one, then you remove this, then you can just change the name. So I want to talk about parameters and arguments. Okay, let's just say if we have a code like this, let's say now we can say something is equals to 1 2 3. Okay, or we can say 246. Okay, so now this something here, what 246 is assigned to something, right? So therefore the something here is referred to as the parameter, whereas the 246 is the argument. Okay, the parameter is assigned, the argument here is assigned to the parameter. 246 is the argument and the parameter is the something, because something here carries 246. So this is the difference between these two. So here the argument is actually the piece of data that is passed on to the parameter. Okay, whereas the parameter is the name of the data. So the name of this data here is the something. Okay, whereas the argument is the data that is passed on to the parameter. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So now let's see a bit further example with different function or multiple function that gives you multiple inputs. Okay, so this one, let's say let's say so we disable this. So now we want to look at multiple arguments, function with multiple arguments. Multiple argument. So now here, as you know, this is just a function that allows for inputs. So now let's say we want to define our own function here that gives us two inputs, that is the name and the location, for an example. So here the name, you can say hello Alhaji, how are you doing? So this is just very simple. As you can see here, we define our greet function, which is greet with, we say, name and location, for an example. So if we want this now, we can use again our f string in order for us to achieve this goal, to allow us to give two inputs. So now if we say print, so now we use print hello. Now we can say hello for an example. Mind you, we use name before, so now we can say hello. We use name again, name. So now we can give our f string here, f string, then we use our quotation here, hello name. Okay, again after the name we say we print again, print how is it like. So now we use again how is it like. So now again we use here location. This is the location. So this again we can use our f string. We can use our f string here, right? So this is an f string. So now we say what? Print. So we first, as you can see here, I don't know if you can notice something in this code. For an example, here you can see when we say define greet with name and location, this one allows us to give two inputs. So first, if you want this piece of code, you can see first it will ask you to give your name and your location, right? So now if we go ahead and run this code, let's say now we say print. So now we can just call this function greet with. So now we can just say greet with. So now we can say greet with. Now we give here the name, like here we see name. We can say Alhaji, and the location, let's say London for an example. Okay. So this one, you can see, I don't want to talk about this first because this is assignment and argument. So we remove the assignment and argument, to just leave this one, it will still work. So now we remove this location and we remove this name. So we'll just leave this comma here. So we want to see first greet with. Okay. Greet with. So now if we go ahead and run this piece of code, you can see definitely this one has two inputs, okay, which is multiple. Two input, the first one is your name and the second one is your location. Here we say London. So let's run this code and see. So here you see hello Alhaji. Hello Alhaji, how are you doing today? Hope everything is fine. Then say how it is like in London. So now we can see how it is like in. So we'll add this in London again. How is it like in London? So now you can see this one, how it is like in London. So here again, you can play with this piece of code. From here, you only have two inputs. Here we have two inputs. The first one is the name and the second one is the location. So let's clear our console here first and see. So we'll try to disable this. We'll disable everything here. Okay, we'll delete this one. So now let's try to run this again. let me just explain something very important. Hello, because we define this is just two functions here that prints hello Alhaj, how is it like in the location, how is it like in London. So first we define our function that has multiple inputs, which is name and location. So now what if we change, instead of here Alhaji, we use here London first. London, and here we say Alhaji. Alhaji. So if we go ahead and run this code again, let's see the difference. So definitely this one does not make sense, because see, hello London, how is it like in Alhaji? So it means when you define your function here, you call your function this parameter here, okay? When you call your function, the first one, the computer will only treat the first one, which is name here, as the first parameter. So 1 equals to 1, location equals to the second parameter, the index. Okay, so the first index here is name, the second index here is location. So if you interchange name in the place of location, it will print name as location. Okay, so in order for us to correct this type of coding, you can either change here the name as what you want to assign first, location followed by name, or name followed by location. Then when it comes to your code here, then we use what we refer to as again is location here. You can use again name in the place of location and location in the place of name. So you can interchange these two and you can run smoothly. So in order for us to correct this type of mistake in our code, we use a simple way of coding referred to as positional arguments. Okay, as you see here before, where we say location equals to. So now this one, irrespective of what we do here, if we say now location, now if we say location equals to London, and we say here comma name, now we say name equals to Alhaji. So now, irrespective of what we do here, you can even change name in the place of location, location in the place of name, irrespective of the index you use. When you print this one, it will give you the actual code you are about to give as outputs. So now let's go ahead and run this and see what will be the correction of this code. So here you see. So now irrespective of the location come before the name, but it also prints hello Alhaji, how is it like in London? Okay, this is just one of the way we are going to use in order for us to solve this type of information. So now let's say this simply means the position does not matter. Irrespective of the position, no sooner you assign this argument to a variable, then it will give you the actual output. Okay, we have another one we refer to as keyword arguments. Okay, but on our next lesson, before we proceed, we shall see on how we go in depth before we create our CISA cipher coding, which has to do with encryption and decryption of your code. So before we end this lesson, I just want to give you a recap. So first, we talked about the simple inputs. We create our own function. Then later, we'll see how we can apply this information in order for us to give an input and get an output. Then later, we come to see a multiple arguments, okay, wherein we use two arguments in order for us to get an output. So here, when we run this code without this keyword argument and positional argument, you see we have misunderstanding of our outputs. So this one here, you can see location is equals to London, name equals to Alhaji. This one again is referred to as keyword argument and positional argument. Positional argument is this one here. As you can see, the first position before we run this code, this one here that I assign London to the location and Alhaji to the name. First, if we remove this one, if we remove the location equals to London, if we remove this to London here, and we remove the name to just Alhaji, this one is referred to as positional argument, okay, because the first position here is assigned to name and the second position here is assigned to location. But to correct this information, as I said, we use keyword arguments. So the keyword arguments now here, we can say this one we can say location. Location now is equals to London, and name is equals to Alhaji. So this now is keyword arguments. Okay, so when we run this piece of code, we get our actual outputs we are looking for. So basically, this is how we treat this type of input function that allow us to give an input. I hope this lesson makes sense to you before we proceed to the next lesson on our next video. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.